Dr. Lyon-Callow is absent. Ms. Rodriguez? Present. Mr. Sharp?
I'm present.
Mr. Bagnozzi is absent. I am present. That is 4 present. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the special meeting of the Okemos Board of Education held in public for the purpose of conducting the business of the school board. Special meetings of the board are often called for a specific purpose with limited items. The agenda will offer no less than one opportunity for the public to address the board on any subject. Individual comments at this time will be limited to 3 minutes, but may be extended at the discretion of the board president. A designated timekeeper will communicate to the individual who is addressing the board at 3 minutes. There will be one opportunity for public comment. This portion of the agenda is near the end of the meeting for anyone who wishes to comment on any subject. Our first and only item of business tonight is a student discipline hearing. Because it is not requested to be in closed session, we are now deal with our one topic tonight. Just to let you know how it's going to go tonight. The hearing portion of tonight's agenda, the school administration will present its side of the story, an opportunity to, and the board will have an opportunity to ask any clarifying questions, and the student representatives will also have that opportunity. Next on the agenda will be an opportunity for the student and the student representatives to make any clarifying statements or questions to the administration, and then there will be concluding statements, an opportunity from the school representatives, and then concluding statements from the student and the student representatives. Then the board will ask any questions of the student and the school representatives. At that point, when the board has determined that there's enough information, we will go to a private room to deliberate. At the time, we will then reconvene out here, and we will present our decision to the room. Okay? So that's kind of the procedures for tonight.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
I have a question regarding the procedural matter. You indicated that we would go into closed session
No.
to deliberate. You just indicated...
I said we were going to go into a private room to deliberate.
Exactly. That would be considered a closed session.
Yeah, we have to
It's not
stay in
within
open
the
session.
purview of 267.
Okay.
So the only way we can go into closed session is at parent request.
So the deliberation has to be out there in public. Okay. I was not aware of that.
No.
I've never done a disciplinary hearing in public. It's always been a closed session, so I apologize for that. Okay, the first line, sure, thank you. We will start with introductions of everyone. I am Amy Kreutz, I'm the board president.
I'm Tanya Rodriguez.
Melanie Lynn. Kathy Ash, superintendent.
I'm Felix Sharp.
Lisa Swen, school district legal counsel.
Christine Cermak, high school principal.
Russ Farrell, high school assistant principal.
Timothy Stewart. Student. Howard Spence. I am an attorney, an arbitrator, and I'm on the executive board of the American Civil Liberties Union in the Greater Lansing area.
Sir Phineas Stewart, Timothy Stewart's mother.
His sister.
His sister.
His sister.
Okay. Now it's time for the high school, the administration to...
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I just need clarification on the procedure. When the school board makes its presentation, will there be an opportunity to cross-examine anyone? Will the testimony be under oath, or will it just be...
This is a school board hearing. This is not a court of law. So
Right,
there will
I'm
be
just
no
asking
cross... I
procedure.
mean, you can certainly ask clarifying questions of the administration at the time that it is appropriate.
And I am allowed to call witnesses?
Sure.
Okay.
That is part of your presentation to the board.
Right, and they could be administrators and staff of the school board. So, that's fine.
Okay. All right. High school administration?
Yes, I would like, on behalf of the administration, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the issues before the school board tonight for deliberation based on the investigation and recommendation from the administrative team. On May 22nd, the student engaged in behavior in Ms. Holmes' English class that led to the involvement of high school administration. Mr. Verrill will be describing to you what his investigation determined and the particular details of the incident. On May 28th, high school administration met with the student and his mother to review the allegations, provide opportunities for responses and further discussion about the matter, as is standard practice at your school. Subsequently, the administration charged the student with 3 violations of the Student Code of Conduct. Number 3A, intimidation and threat directed to an adult. Number 8, disruptive behavior. And number 9, insubordination. Additionally, based on the student's pattern of disruptive behavior, he is also being charged with persistent disobedience. It should be noted that the student does receive special education programming. Accordingly, a manifestation determination review was conducted and determined that his conduct was not substantially related to his disability, which is categorized as learning disability for math. The recommendation from the high school's administration is that the student be expelled. And you'll hear from high school principal Cermak as to the rationale for that expulsion. It's important to note that all matters regarding this particular disciplinary matter fall within the Student Code of Conduct. There is not a statutory mandate for the board to take action. The authorization for the board to act is under Section 1311, subsection 1, which allows the Board of Education to suspend or expel a student for gross misdemeanor or persistent disobedience. And so it's the violation of the Code of Conduct, as I've outlined, that is the basis of the charge. As you listen to information presented by the administration as well as by the students and the students' representatives, there really are 2 issues for the board to consider. 1, did the conduct occur as alleged? And 2, if so, if you find by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning is it more likely than not that the conduct occurred, then what is the appropriate consequence? The consequence in this situation, should you find the conduct occurred, is within your good, sound discretion. Again, you are not compelled to take certain action as a matter of state statute, as you might otherwise be in other circumstances. So with that overview, I'm going to ask Assistant Principal Verrill to describe to you the factual basis for what led to the charges and the scope of his investigation.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, ma'am, to interrupt. I may have missed the procedure. Was that an opening statement? I need to wait till 9. Is that the procedure?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry for the
No
interruption.
problem. It's, yeah, no problem.
Did you get a copy of the procedures?
I have much paper, I'm sure I did.
Yeah, in fact, one's right in front of Ms. Stewart, I think.
Oh, okay, well, see, everybody's sharing my paperwork, thank you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you all have them, but I saw this was on top, so I thought that might be the easiest. Okay.
Okay, on May 22nd, in Tim's English class, the teacher is Ms. Holmes, Ms. Holmes was working with students, trying to get the class settled to get started, and was, trying to get some of the students on task. And she particularly had to work with one student in class to try to get him to stop talking. He kept talking, and the teacher finally said, you know what, I need you to stop talking for at least 15 minutes, or you're going to receive a detention. And I want you to repeat it back to me so you know, so I know you heard me. He repeated it back and got to task. And voices were lowered and things, he started to work. Tim was seated one computer over from the student, and Tim started to ask him, are you going to take that? And so on. The boy just ignored Tim, but Tim continued to talk to him. So the teacher, Mrs. Holmes, turned around and said, again quietly, not trying to embarrass anyone or create confrontation, Tim, this boy doesn't need your advice right now. I asked Tim to read a story that I've asked him to read for the past week. And he responded very loudly, for the benefit of everyone, you better watch yourself, you better get out of my face with that, I'm not. And then he repeated the boy's name that she was trying to get on task. The teacher immediately wrote him a detention, which Tim threw on the floor and landed near the teacher. The teacher wrote another detention and just simply let him know that there was a second one, but she did not hand it to him. Her sense was, whatever, from her point of view, he needs at least 2 detentions, and so that was the incident that occurred at that particular time.
And based on that incident, describe how the facts as you learned them support the charges of intimidation that are threats directed toward an adult, disruptive behavior, and insubordination.
Well, it was done in, obviously, the behavior was done in class in front of all the other students, so we have disruptive behavior there. It was said out loud. The direct quote, you better watch yourself and you better get out of my face. We, the administration, felt definitely that was a direct threat toward one of our teachers. And the fact that Tim wouldn't quiet down and get started and continue to argue with the teacher regarding what was going on in the classroom became an insubordinate type of behavior in that incident.
Describe to the board what happened next in terms of your involvement and investigation.
Well, I brought Tim in and talked to Tim about what took place, and he indicated that indeed he did say those words. He said that he felt very badly about him. We have had incidences before, which is part of the behavior, part of the pattern of behavior, disruptive behavior, and also threats. He said at the time that he knew it was wrong, but he said it. And we've had conversations before about saying things to adults and those types of things. And Tim seems to get it when I talk to him, but he continues to have that same pattern of behavior time and time again after being having discussion, trying to counsel him on making better choices in the classroom, how we treat one another, and how we treat teachers and everything else. At that point, Tim was suspended from school and continued to take a look at this as an administrative team. He decided that because we do have a pattern of behavior with threats towards adults and with him, and also the disruption, he felt we would move forward with the expulsion process.
Some additional questions. Focusing on the May 22nd incident, did Tim explain his behavior to you? Did he say, I did it, and here's why I did it?
Yes.
Well, tell the board what he told you, please.
He indicated that this was an accurate account of what took place. He did say that. He also indicated that he thought that Ms. Holmes she's struggling a little bit to get the class on task. And when he was brought to, task, and asked to do his work, he responded by saying it first. And so there really wasn't a lot of discussion, if you will, on why he said that he realized he should rise.
And he said that to you, that he realized he made a mistake? Okay. But he offered no explanation or justification for his conduct. Now, you also described to the board a pattern of disruptive behavior, and indeed that is an additional charge against the student. Please explain what you rely on to support that charge.
Well, I guess there's two areas of where we'll be looking at. One is that if we're looking at, this is the fourth time he has threatened an adult, 3 times towards Ms. Holmes and 1 towards the Spanish teacher, then they're looking at a pattern of behavior that threatens adult teachers in our building. This was the 4th time that it occurred. Each time before that, he was suspended from school. And so we tried to work with him to try and get him to change behavior. It does not seem to be working. And so there's that pattern of behavior. Also, we have in your possession a discipline log for Timothy. And as you can see, as you go through this discipline log, there are many incidences which are disruptive. There are patterns of aggressive behavior in his discipline log, not only towards male students, but also a female student at one time. So as we continue to take a look at what's going on with Tim and how the disruption continues, it really wasn't getting better. We felt that it was part of the rationale for expulsion.
Any other factual information about the student and this matter you wish to share with the board?
No, I think that incident and the fact that, again, there is a pattern of behavior that is continuing. We want to provide a safe environment for all our students at all times, and that's what we're doing. Students ask that.
Thank you. Mr. Spence, I'm going to anticipate perhaps a question regarding procedure. I'm next going to ask Mrs. Cermak questions about the recommendation, and then I have nothing further. Then it will be your opportunity to present your case, and if at that point you wish to ask clarifying questions to either administrator or police. Mrs. Cermak, you're familiar with Tim and the particular circumstances related to the charges. Please explain to the board, as the board's high school principal, the basis for your recommendation that Tim be expelled from the Okemos Public Schools.
As you know, bringing a student to the school board for expulsion is never an easy thing for any of us. And looking and reflecting back specifically with Tim, I felt like, again, we've really had numerous interventions to try and help Tim be successful within our school setting. As you may recall, Mr. Merrill talked about some of the discussions he's had with Tim. Tim was assigned to a mentor. This is our first year, and I think I presented to the board about our teachers and student mentors. He was assigned to a mentor at the school. We've had several staffings. In your hands, you'll see a student intervention record in which classroom teachers, this is a tool that we utilize for students who we feel are at risk of failing a class, and we try to open, especially at the high school level, open as many doors as possible to allow teachers to share, what course are they in, what are the strengths of the student, what things have worked, what things haven't worked, and probably Tim's intervention record and documentation is probably one of the more lengthier ones, because again, many teachers have collaborated and staffed on Tim trying to help him be successful. And obviously we've had conversations with him as well as with the parent. And bringing Tim forward really after speaking with he and his mom, when I reflected upon our code of conduct, Those rules in the code of conduct are there to obviously promote the safety and the as you heard Mr. Barrell recount specifically Tim's actions and choices over the last 2 years have really interfered with our learning environment as well as compromise the welfare of our teachers' right to teach in a safe and orderly environment. He's established a pattern of behavior despite the interventions both on the part of family, staff members, support staff, administration. If we refer to the log entries, it's language, it's hand in the shapes of a gun, it's distracting others, it's threatening teachers. And so, again, our role is to ensure the environment is free of limiting distractions as well as safety of our teachers. And because of the threats predominantly, and that's really one of the biggest, when you look at kind of tipping the scale, but the multiple threats to our staff members and the persistent disobedience, not just in one class, but in multiple classes. And that is why we're here today and recommending that Tim be expelled from Okemos High School and Okemos Public Schools for the 2014-2015 school year.
Thank you. That concludes the administration's presentation.
Okay, now it's an opportunity for the board to ask any questions. Yes. And also, this time, for you to ask any questions of the school administration. Do we have any questions?
No, I'm sorry.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the board to the school administration?
I can start with something. I'm looking at this blue page. It's an email from Lisa Holmes to Russ Terrell. And I think it might add something to what your presentation was getting at. And I was just curious, what your take on it was and if there was a reason why you didn't reference this. But I'm looking at this email. It says that Ms. Holmes is stating that she's taught for 20 years, and that this is the first time that she thought that everyone would be safer if she just left Tim alone and let him do whatever he wanted to do right now. That happened, was that the May 22nd incident that she's talking about?
It is.
Because I was wondering to myself, I'm sorry, I'm kind of asking multiple questions, but I was wondering to myself, like after he crumpled up the detention and threw it on the floor, and she wrote him another detention, why he remained in the classroom at that point. And I'm wondering if this email addresses that.
It addresses it because she did not want to have any more confrontation with him as far as escalating and so on. So she felt the best thing to do was just write that other detention and just leave it alone at that time. And that's when she circled back to me with the original of what took place to let me know what happened. I would take a look at it and decide how we would move forward from that point. And you're right, this email from Ms. Holmes is her account of how she felt, why she responded the way she did, because she was very concerned for the safety of herself and also the students in the classroom.
As a follow-up, how would, in previous situations where teachers would not have felt that they wanted to de-escalate the situation, or what would be a normal response or a typical response from a teacher? How would this kind of situation have resolved itself in this setting?
Yeah. I mean, in this setting, in a classroom setting, something like this, I mean, typically a teacher would ask the student to leave, go to the office.
Okay.
Contact the office.
Just wanted to be clear about what, right.
Sometimes they would say, please move to the hall and have a private conversation in the hallway. I mean, those are all opportunities for a teacher to have a little bit more dialogue with the student or have that student removed from the classroom. She's tried very hard to work with Tim on a number of occasions, and she's referenced that also in her email, and she felt that the first time, okay, I can work with Tim, and she's really worked hard to build up trust with him. But in this particular occasion, she felt that he had definitely crossed the line, and she felt differently than she had before when Tim had threatened her.
Oh, go ahead. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I appreciate. Ms. Cermak, you mentioned in your presentation numerous interventions, and I don't think that I truly have a perspective of the numerous part of that statement, if you will, because we mentioned mentors, that a mentor was assigned, and I'm assuming during, what I'd like to get a feel for is, in the breadth of, you referenced this Power School document to identify the, I guess, the scope of and frequency of infractions or actions, behaviors that were challenging to the school environment. So what I'd like to appreciate from the administration is the timeline associated with awareness of the need for an intervention, and I'm using words that I've heard you state, and then the other things that the school would have done to support the numerous interventions concept, the word or statement that you've made. And I recognize that the mentor being assigned was for social intervention. I'd like for you to speak to other interventions and the care, because I hear Mr. Verrill say, and I know that this is a long iteration, but I've heard Mr. Verrill say that Ms. Holmes, thank you, felt as if she had exerted quite a bit of energy to support Tim. And I just want to get a sense for the spirit of the numerous interventions and the course that goes into this.
I can speak really from this year. I mean, I'll let Russ kind of go back from last year, but just in this year, one of the things that we've tried to do with the high school is, obviously, you know, it's a big high school, but identify students who we say who are in need of making connections. And it's either behaviorally, or it's socially, or it's emotional. I mean, there's just a multitude of different reasons and rationale why. And Tim was identified as a student within our school in need of making connections. And it really stemmed from the behavior, from the law entries. And so one of the things that we did at the very beginning of the year is we looked at a list of approximately 30 students and about 33 staff members, and we matched him up with Mr. Ira Childress, who is our athletic director, as you're all aware. And Mr. Childress, for example, met with him, was supposed to be meeting on Wednesdays, and met the first time, and then tried to engage Tim in meeting again, and that didn't work. And that's okay, you know, it might not always work. Another thing that we tried to do is help him make a connection with school. One of the things I did is, and Kyle did, one of our school supervisors, is during the lunch hour, there's a group with Tim and, I don't know, Tim, what, about 30, would you say about 30 young men? I think they're all boys, right? Young men? About 20 to 30, you know, we open up the gym. We've never done that before, but again, a sense of belonging, release some energy. When Kyle can't cover it, I go in there and I supervise, and they play basketball, and I think I've played a couple times myself. And so again, just trying to find those connections, you know, get a sense of belonging. We have a new team talk, not team, we have our math coach. As you recall, Missy McCarthy came and spoke at the very beginning of the year. Tim was in the class with Missy McCarthy and Karen Brunner. So again, we're looking at the students who really, and I've been told multiple times that as Tim is very bright, but again, it's helping him stay focused, helping him stay connected, helping him stay positive. And so between Mrs. Brunner, who's one of our most gifted teachers, as well as Missy McCarthy, the two of them were in class together. Another wonderful teacher, Colleen Palmer, is another one in the class. And I've been in the classroom before where, again, trying to make connections, using proximity with him, talking about things that he likes. I mean, just a number of different things as far as that relationship piece, that class size piece, that co-teaching piece, that, finding somebody outside of the academic realm like a Kyle, for example, to make connections. And so the other thing as far as so you have that component, but the other thing that I think you'll see if you take a closer look at the intervention record is really the different things that teachers have tried to do, whether it's moving seats, it's calling home, it's giving him warnings, it's talking to him about positives. If you look in the email about with Lisa, Mrs. Holmes, I mean, really trying to recognize the positives as well as holding him accountable for the classroom expectations. But you'll see positives in there, trying to encourage him, trying to, again, work one-on-one, which he works very well if it's one-on-one, but the minute you walk away, then the distraction. So trying to balance that, giving him the one-on-one attention both for the social-emotional need, but also for the academic need, but then also trying to meet the needs within the classroom. So those are just a couple of examples. I know that there's been staffings with Mr. Verrill's been part of them. I know that Ms. Stewart's been part of them, as well as teachers, in order, again, to figure out what is working, what isn't working, what can we try and put in place to support the student. Like we said, the seat changes, the proximity. Tim started on caseload this year, and I know in talking to him at the last meeting, felt that really helped him as well. So, in finding that connection with the case manager. So, those are just a couple of examples, and I can tell you, even coming in from the middle school, we have a list that we've tried to do of students needing to make connections. So our first interactions with Tim would be positive versus anything, the pattern of behavior coming from the middle school, to try and start fresh, start new, make connections.
And from the special education perspective, Ashley Abrams, who is our school social worker, even though Tim is not on his caseload, we felt maybe that he could reach out to Tim and try to talk to him on a few occasions and so on, to get to know him and try to, counsel him and see what makes him tick, what makes it work for him. And so our social worker had an opportunity to meet with him. And as a matter of fact, I know that he met with him the other day in the hall. They saw each other, and Tim thanked Mr. Abrams for, saying hi, talking to him, trying to get to know him, and so on. And so there was a connection there with our social worker reaching out to connect with him.
So it's expanded beyond just the classroom support to trying to tap into other creative needs like athletic director and or social worker and or Kyle, or like I said, when I'm in the gymnasium with them. So it's a team approach.
And thank you for pointing this out.
Mr. Trout.
Questions for the school administration? I didn't clarify the answers.
I just want to go back to Rodriguez. When you asked the question about why we didn't point that out, that's another thing that we often do with the discipline. When a threat is made, whether it's student to student and or it's student to teacher, which is very rare within Okemos Public Schools. But one of the things we always do is go to the recipient of the threat. And that's why, again, you'll see we did share this with both Tim, the email, which is on your blue sheet, as well as with his mom, is we ask, how did you feel? How did you feel? We try to get to, again, the perception. So it's not always about, I didn't mean that or that wasn't my intent, but oftentimes we do take into account what was the perception of the victim, sort of say, or the person on the other hand. That doesn't mean that that's going to go this way or that, but that is a very important piece. And I think in dialoguing with Mrs. Holmes as well as Tim's Spanish teachers, they have constantly tried to work and trying to, continue to kind of get back up and try to make that connection. And that's why I think, for me especially, this latest email, especially with how much respect I have for Ms. Holmes and how she felt, that's really, again, another thing that tipped and said, this needs to be something that we do in fact bring to
just have a couple of questions. Would you like to ask a question?
I would, in response to what Ms. Sylvan said, but you can feel free to go ahead.
I just need some clarification. You said he was put on caseload. Is that a recent? And does that mean he was assigned?
Qualified for special education services.
Okay.
And
Recently.
April 28th.
So special education caseload. And how long has Tim been a student in these schools?
2 years. At Okemos High School.
At Okemos High School. So what grade is he in currently? 10th grade?
Sophomore.
He just completed his sophomore year.
Sorry, the family's been with our district for longer than just 2 years.
Oh, so, I mean, he's been at the high school freshman sophomore year, but as an Okemos student, he's been in the district longer than.
Yeah.
6 years.
Okay.
And so in 6 years, not 2, and he was just determined to be a special ed education student? This year, had he ever been tested before?
Not by the school.
And he only qualified for learning disability in math?
Correct.
May I ask, what are the other possibilities that he may have qualified for? If not just he, but any student, what are the other possibilities?
I'd like to respond to that as school district council. There's over 24 eligibility categories as a matter of law.
Okay.
So in the realm of possibility, the Michigan Administrative Code identifies those eligibility categories as well as the criteria for those. They range from otherwise health impaired, autism spectrum disorder, emotionally impaired, learning disability, cognitively impaired, physically impaired. There are a couple dozen categories.
And he did not test positive for any of those categories, emotional disability?
Well, again, I would
That's my
feel
question.
equipped to respond to that. There's not a one-size-fits-all test. It's sort of like if any of us were to go seek medical intervention, they're not going to run all the tests. They're going to focus on typically a test that may be indicated by presenting information. And I think the same analogy is true for eligibility for special education programs and services. There's a very detailed process where, first of all, there's usually a team meeting gathering information from staff members. It's a fairly formalized process. Typically, forms are completed and reviewed to determine what testing may be appropriate. And typically in these situations, there's input from parent and sometimes student as well, as that process then decides, here is the test, here is the data we want to gather to determine. Then once we have that information, we apply it to the eligibility criteria and determine, based on the legal standards, is this person eligible or not.
So then, Ms. Swim, is it safe to say then that for purposes of Mr. Stewart, Timothy Stewart, he was only then tested for learning disability in math? Is that what we're suggesting?
For this recent, this last year, I would have to.
I would have to look at what gamut of testing. Typically, we don't just test a student just for math.
And that's what I was understanding Ms. Swim to say.
Well, you don't test them on all 24 categories, but there's, you do multiple tests.
So I just wonder, my question is, has he ever been tested for any behavioral health Not even
If-
behavioral health,
if I
emotional
look-
disability
If
or
I look
otherwise.
back and review this file from special education, that he's had a history of academic and behavioral difficulties. He was diagnosed with ADHD in 2005, was initially evaluated for special ed supports, which resulted in an otherwise health impaired. Tim was dismissed from receiving special education supports in 3rd grade per parent request. A behavior plan, for example, in place that would target a couple of those behaviors.
Yes.
A lot of times, yeah, you would have a social worker. You might be working, signing a form where if they had an outside therapist and or counselor that again shared information would be part of that. And then obviously we would have a case manager, kind of like we talked about earlier, a special education teacher in the house or in the building that would be the point person for that student.
And in this instance, because Mr. Stewart was not diagnosed or indicated, I think this is the term you use, he didn't have those.
The word would be
Qualified.
qualified.
Thank you.
He would need to qualify through special education law.
Right, he would need to qualify, but because he did not qualify, but we don't know whether or not he was tested, he did not have those types of supports in place.
He did not have those types of supports in place per special education law, for example, because it was not part of his IEP, because he did not qualify under that diagnosis. We did tap into, for example, Mr. Abrams, because we felt, again,
Right.
that might be another kind of support system for Tim.
You indicated he did not qualify. Does that mean that he was tested then?
I don't, without looking
Okay.
at his IEP, I would not know what tests were actually run. And
So we can't say that he didn't qualify, we just don't know whether or not he was
I can
tested.
tell you he didn't qualify because it's not one of his areas of disability. You have a primary disability and a secondary disability, and if it's not listed, he didn't qualify.
So that means he was tested then?
No.
What does it mean?
No.
He didn't qualify.
Just to add a point of clarification, in the special education process, a team meets and looks at data related to a student. And they look at academic data, they look at behavioral data, anecdotal data, classroom data, standardized test scores, all of that.
Parent input.
Parent input, right. And then there is a school psychologist in the room. And based on all of that input, the school psychologist will have a good feel about some of the areas that maybe they want to explore further.
Right.
So I would suspect, based on the behavioral pieces, somewhere along the line, they looked at some potential to see whether there was any qualification based on behavior as well as academics. As it turned out, that in this particular case, the student qualified as a math disability.
So the student qualified as a math disability, and then that team then obviously determined that there was no need to consider an emotional disability based on his behavior in the discussion in the room. Is that so? Someone had to make that decision.
Well,
Here we go. There was sources of data to determine were the school records review, parent interview, student interview, teacher reports, observation, curriculum-based measurement, curriculum assessments, the Weschler Adult Intelligence Scale 4th edition, the Weschler Individual Achievement Test 2nd edition, Woodcock-Johnson Test Achievement 3rd edition, Scales for Assessing Emotional Disturbance 2nd edition, Connors Grading Score Short Form 3rd edition.
Connors is typically used for ADHD.
So yes, he was tested for emotional.
So he was tested and he did not qualify. That isn't consistent with what I see here. Or the behavior that we're here to discuss.
I can respond to that generally. I can't respond specifically to this student because I have not reviewed this file. Just because certain behaviors are demonstrated, or even just because a medical practitioner, licensed healthcare provider, provides a diagnosis, that is not enough to qualify. It's very important information for the team, and initially it's called the MET, the Multidisciplinary Evaluation Team, to look at all the data, apply it to the legal standard established by the Michigan Department of Education, which is based on the federal standards, to determine, and there are very specific questions that are posed to the team to determine eligibility under all these various characteristics. So I can only surmise, and that's why I say generally, because I've not reviewed the file on this aspect, that with the testing that was just reported, it must, and the additional data that was provided to the team, that the criteria, for example, an emotionally impaired status was not satisfied. Because these school professionals have a duty, if they find that there are criteria that apply to make a child eligible, they have a duty to follow through on that.
I'm aware of that, Ms. Swim. And what I'm reading here, and this is just for the 2013-2014 school year, this does not demonstrate some behavioral and emotional impairments. I'm not sure what does, so that's why I asked the question and wonder whether or not, I understand that you said there were interventions applied. Were there any interventions applied via a plan of some sort with behavioral professionals, school psychologists, with school psychologists involved?
Like a comprehensive behavior plan? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, you suggested that, in fact, if he qualified for emotional disability, then he would have had a behavior plan.
Yeah.
And as much as he didn't qualify, I assume there wasn't one. But despite that, there were teachers, there was the athletic director. And by the way, he only met once with the athletic director. What happened with that? Why didn't that continue?
Well, according to the athletic director, he tried to meet with him out in the hall to say, hey, Tim, are you going to come in? And it was on Wednesdays. And obviously you can ask Tim when it's his opportunity. But when I asked him about that at our meeting together on May 28th of 2014, and I'm referencing letter 2, I asked just, about, because I knew that Mr. Childers was his assigned mentor. We thought that would be a really good fit. And when I asked why he chose not to meet with his assigned mentor, Tim stated, I just got distracted. I know we were supposed to meet on Wednesdays. When I talked to Mr. Childress as a follow-up, because we met once a month with the mentoring committee to see how things were going, he said that Tim didn't want to meet, chose not to meet, that he would see him in the hallways and try to encourage him, hey, you're coming in today. And again, using Tim's words, but obviously you can ask Tim, that he just got distracted. So
if I may, I hate to interrupt, but I hate to see speculation condemning my client.
I'm not trying to
Well,
condemn
no,
him.
but the things you're speculating about are inconsistent with the information that you've already given.
Okay, I would just again reference my May 28th interview with Tim.
So did certainly. So then, was the school psychologist ever engaged with Mr. Stewart, or was he ever afforded any counseling?
Let me just speak to that quickly. Our school psychologists don't do therapy.
Okay.
They just don't. So when we say we have a school psychologist, they do testing. They may help teachers with interventions with students, but they don't do any kind of therapy, just so you know.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Ash. So, and was that ever then considered and discussed with, was that ever a discussion with the family?
The school social worker, Mr. Abrams, when we mentioned earlier about Mr. Abrams meeting with him, even though he was not on his caseload, he did not qualify for services.
Yes.
But we do that sometimes with our students who don't qualify because we do believe that it is a good match or in need, and did consult with Mr. Abrams in regards to Tim.
And the end result was?
Yes. I'm sorry.
I just noticed on the, we're looking specifically at the MET team eligibility report summary for emotional impairment. So the team specifically looked at this issue. And the criteria that are stated in Michigan law, based on federal law, are reflected right on this form. And
We don't have that form.
no, you don't,
Okay.
because it's not typically the purview of the Board of Education to address special education issues. As a matter of law, this is an issue assigned to the IEP team. So the document I have, which answers your question, Mr. Sharp, is yes, they specifically looked at this issue on April 18th, 2014. They checked, he was not eligible. It's signed by the general ed teacher, the social worker, the special education team, special education teacher, and the school psychologist. And each of them checked the box that, yes, they agreed with the determination he was not eligible for emotional impairment. Parents who disagree with a determination have additional procedural rights where they can challenge and appeal such a determination.
Was that determination, Ms. Swim, based on testing or just based on the view and perspective of the MET team?
Well, the MET is based, the MET reviews the data that includes the testing and anecdotal information and other reports that Mrs. Cermak read to you earlier.
And so that was a group decision. And how many individuals were involved in that process? 4 were involved, including the school psychologist?
Psychologist, special ed teacher, social worker, and general education teacher.
And this behavior that is demonstrated in this student intervention record, the fact that he's identified for this process did not qualify.
No, and that doesn't, I've been practicing special education law for over 25 years, and such a conclusion doesn't surprise me. Because behaviors are manifested in many different ways and explained many different ways. And an emotional impairment, as a matter of law, has specific criteria, and they didn't apply here.
Ask a related question. I'm looking at this June 4, 2014 letter that references the manifestation determination meeting that was held on June 3rd, 2014, at which time it was determined that Timothy's offenses were not a manifestation of his disability. Can I get some more information about that? Who was involved in that decision and what the decision-making process was?
During a manifestation meeting or hearing, the special education director is along with the regular ed teacher, the school psychologist was there, the social worker was there. Typically, Tim's counselor, she was unable to attend. I was there just to give an overview of what took place, so what happened. They were able to ask questions. Mrs. Stewart was there. Tim was there. And so I tell them, well, I just told you what took place. And then the school psychologist reads her report from the testing and so on. And then it goes around the room. I'm not a voting person. I can't vote whether I believe in the manifestation or not. Voter would be the regular ed teacher, the school psychologist, the social worker, counselor would have had a vote, and it was determined by everyone that his behavior was not a manifestation.
The questions that they ask, so you know, are the conduct in question was caused by or had a direct and substantial relationship to the student's disability, and the team has determined no. The second question that needs to be asked of the team is the conduct in question was the direct result of the school district's failure to implement the current IEP. And again, the IEP, the answer was no. And so therefore, and it was not a manifestation of the disability, so the student would be subject to general education discipline.
And for this purpose, the disability.
So, Darrell, you indicated that there are 4 instances where Mr. Stewart has made a specific threat. I know that the May 27th letter to Ms. Stewart, coupled with Ms. Holmes's email, is one of them, correct? It's one of them. Can you indicate, we've got a lot of material here, and I did read the yellow, did not get to the Power School. Can you indicate the other 3 instances and what those specific threats were?
Sure. On January 21st,
Mr. Sharp, I'm going to make it, in case you don't want to take notes, but in my letter on May 27th,
Yes.
if you look at number 3, I actually captured the other.
Okay.
So if we all look at the May 27th, 2014 letter and go to bullet point number 3, or number 3.
So I'm going to go off on you. You have pissed me off. If you don't stop talking, I will embarrass you and make you cry in front of this class. And the third is, if you don't get out of my face right now, I'll. And he said it don't gotta be a threat. Well, those 3. And then the threat on May 22nd specifically to Ms. Holmes.
In the same letter, go up 2 bullet points, and we'll have the language that was used there.
Is, that's the you better get out of my face. I'm not CJ.
Further questions for the administration?
I just have one final question, and I was trying to reconcile the information that was provided. So we have the Power School information, and then we have the student intervention record information. It's highlighted on the yellow sheet, and then there's another sheet that identifies discipline records. And it does, and I really want, my first question is, how does this discipline record information complement the information in the Power School? I did not have a chance to see whether or not they overlap.
I can explain. We were at our meeting, Mrs. Stewart and I, Mr. Barrell and Tim, for the due process hearing, and we were looking at the discipline law. The font was really, really small, and so there were some questions about being able to see the font, which I get, it's very small, but there was also some discrepancies in the dates. And so what Mrs. Stewart asked is, she asked for clarification, because if you look at the dates on the left-hand side, those are the dates that, again, the incident was entered, not necessarily it occurred. So what we tried to do, and that's our system that we work within. So you can't change the date in which it's entered. So what we've tried to really do from that, throughout the year, is make sure we include the date that it was, it actually occurred. But that's always on the referral form. But this is the documentation. So this is just she asked, can you give me within the last, I think it was, I'd have to go back and look.
Okay.
Oh, since January, can you let me know the suspensions to which you're referring? Because she did point out some discrepancies, and that was because an incident didn't happen on January 31st. That's when it was entered.
Thank you, Ms. Sarmat, for providing that clarity. So then, I'm sorry? Okay. Just wanted to, because I did have a chance to read through this document. In a number of these instances, on the 5/8/14, 2/4/14, and 1/17/14, I just picked 3. There were failure to serve either Saturday school detention or another failure to serve detention. What comes out of that? I don't understand if there was some violation to some rule, and there is a consequence that is applied, a Saturday school, a detention, a whatever. And failure to serve is that if a child does not serve, what?
If you look at basically the one you're referring to, so basically Ms. Brunner for disruptive behavior assigned Tim 1 detention to be served by 11014 for disruptive behavior not working after being warned several times. So the teacher assigned a detention to be served by 110. And then I'm going to turn it over to you because you can explain the rest.
When they don't serve their detention during that timeline, then they are given a Saturday school. So most of the detention to a Saturday school. If they don't serve their Saturday schools, a lot of times it'll go from a Saturday school to an in-school. So it's a progression. Okay?
Progression caused by insubordination.
By the failure to serve their assigned discipline.
Okay.
So it moves up the scale.
And I appreciate that clarity. You'll just hold for a minute. Ms. Cermak, you were making some point before Mr. Varrell spoke, and I did not make the connection to whatever that point was that you were making. No. She said for you to hold on because I didn't understand the connection of what you said to what I fully understand Mr. Varrell's progression.
I probably should have let him speak the whole time, but
Okay.
I found what you're talking about. So Karen Brunner assigned Tim to serve the detention by January 10th. Tim didn't serve the detention by January 10th. So if you look at your large font, friendly eye font for all of us, on 117 he was assigned a Saturday school because he failed to serve the disruptive detention by 110.
You were telling me the progression of the actions that
I was
led up
speaking
to this.
specifically
Okay.
to the incident to which you're referring here. And
Okay.
so,
All right. Thank you. I'm finished.
Quick clarifying question, how does one serve a detention? What does it require of the student?
The student can serve it, they have 10 school days to serve it from the time it's given, and they have 10 school days. We have detentions on Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. They can walk into the room, sign in, do their detention, it's logged as being they served. And
how long is that?
it's about a 55-minute after-school detention. It's run by one of our student supervisors.
Okay, so detentions are those days that you mentioned for 50 minutes after school.
Correct.
And if a student can't serve the detention, which handful, there's other things that they typically will talk either to the supervisor or they'll come back to their assistant principal and ask for an extension.
At times that happens.
At times.
Or if perhaps they're dependent on the bus, how do you work around that if you can?
They have to find their own transportation if it's a bus. Parents are going to have to pick them up after school, after their detention. Yeah. Occasionally we'll do a lunch detention, but that's typically not because of a ride situation.
Do you recall, as to Tim specifically, if any concern was ever brought to your attention about him being unable to stay after school or to serve a detention or to come in on a Saturday to serve a detention?
That would have been a discussion he and I would have on all of these kinds of things. And he just, when Tim gets those detentions, he's told that he has these 10 days and knows exactly where to go and that sort of thing. And they are responsible for making their own, getting the ride, making all the appropriate decisions and making sure that gets done. And so there has never been a conversation where I don't have a right to a detention, from a detention, so
Okay. The parents are made aware of the
They're made aware of
behavioral
the
issue,
detention.
the disciplinary issues, and the time that they're to be served. Correct? So family, guardian, parent, whoever. Okay. Mr. Sheriff, did you have a question?
Madam Chair, that was a while ago. So then this date system is set out, because because one of the questions I had was, well, the incident on May 22nd, the 22nd of May, he was immediately suspended then. There was no lag time between the incident and him being suspended, was there?
There's usually not lag time between it's the lag time is when we actually enter it within Power
Right.
School. We fill out all of the other documentation then and contact parents that day.
Right.
But yes, we typically don't keep a student in school for a week after threatening the teacher and then.
Or fights. We have a person that works just 2 hours in the morning to do all our inputting. And depending on how things are going, whether she's ill, there's some time that does lapse between the incident and the inputting.
Good.
Good.
How long of a suspension, what's the length of his suspension, or his suspensions to this point? Has he served, I can't really tell from the log entries.
His 10th day was the day of his manifestation.
Is that the longest suspension he has had
Yes.
during his time at Okemos High School?
Yes.
So prior to the May 22nd incident, they've been in shorter suspension
Correct.
periods, 1-2 days?
Correct. And then Tim was allowed to come back and do his take his final exams. And he had full makeup privileges during that time, as far as this, so he could get the credits.
Right.
Because it did happen at the end of the year. He was allowed to turn in all his work and come in and take his final exams. And Tim has been doing it. I've seen Tim in the building.
Excellent. Okay.
2 or 3 days
So
in a
this
row.
is the longest, this is,
Well, I can look back to the one that's documented on 2-4, and it looks like it was a 4-day suspension for the extremist behavior, swearing, insubordinate, pushing.
right, the 131 suspended, yeah. The 121, 122, 123, 124, so that was a 4-day suspension, but that was the longest up to that point.
I have one more question here. There's no emotional disability. In your professional experience, what is the problem?
I can't answer that, because I'm not going to diagnose or attempt to diagnose what the problem is. I would not do that.
Is it the responsibility of the district to do that?
The responsibility, I think, of the district, again, if it's not, doesn't qualify under the manifestation to implement the handbook and then all of the interventions that we know that have proven to be effective. And that's why we shared some of the interventions with you today.
The only thing he qualified was learning disability in math. None of this behavior has anything to do with how well he was or wasn't doing in math. And I'll ask him when it's his turn how well he was doing in math, or do we know how well he was doing in math?
I can tell you that he did not pass his math class in 9th grade, and he's taking that over, and that's why he was placed in one of the reasons he was placed in the course. But he did not pass Adaptive Algebra 1, and currently he's not passing right now, but again, we don't have all of his materials in, so.
Well, how many times do we know how many times he's been suspended?
Overall,
Overall, do we know?
I mean, I can find that out for you if you'd like.
It's not necessary. If we had it, fine. If we don't, that's fine. I mean, I would imagine, as I look at, as I read through this record, coupled with the student intervention record, I'm surprised that it's taken so long for the district to bring him before us or to take this action. Quite frankly, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that behavior would get to this point, or would continue as consistent as it has. I mean, there are double entries or entries every other day in some instances, and the only intervention that has been taken is contact with the parent, sitting him outside of the classroom, moving his assigned seat, and perhaps, we've had him talk with mentors who were not able to connect with him. Those are the interventions I see here. If I missed any, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm surprised. So I'm done, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Okay, I'm going to ask for a short break between, but before I do, just because I'm so concerned that we are hearing the speculation, which is wrong, about his behavior. In the April 18th report from the evaluation team, there's a clear note under the PLAAFP statement, which apparently the administration hasn't read. And it's relatively short, so I'll read it to you because it addresses your concern.
Okay, where is it again, sir?
It is in the...
You don't have it.
You don't have it, it's in the special education record.
Okay, right. But you know, they're telling you what's not in the record, but they're telling you incorrectly, I believe.
With all due respect, and I do need to answer that.
Okay. Well, they're speculating. It may not be incorrect, but
Well,
we have the
we're
report.
Thank you. I certainly you're going to make your point. Keep in mind, please, number one, the speculation is based on questions being posed to administrators regarding the special education process and eligibility determination, which is made by other specialists who are not here tonight. That's a very important point to know. And by necessity, myself included, when I was attempting to respond to questions, saying, I can't respond specifically. We want to provide the best answers we can. So, and I know what you're going to read, and you should read it, but I would remind the Board of Education that your job tonight is twofold. Did the conduct occur, and if so, what's the appropriate disciplinary consequence? Anything having to do with special education, eligibility, evaluation, manifestation, appropriate programming and services, by law is not a function of the Board of Education. It is a function of the IEP process. Parents have very specific and significant procedural and substantive rights and have an opportunity to pursue all of those avenues. Having said that, thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And I was not insinuating that you were misrepresenting in any way.
I
I've been in that position myself.
I understand.
Right. But in light of the questions he was asking, because behavior is a significant issue which was not addressed, except in this April 18th report, which the principal read excerpts from. She neglected to read the PLAAFP statement, which is relatively short. Evaluation results yielded a pattern of strengths and weaknesses indicating a learning disability in the areas of written expression, math reasoning, and math calculation. And then there's this big note, which is longer. Although Tim had previously diagnosed with ADHD, and evaluation data supports that this is a primary factor impacting him in the classroom setting, medical documentation was not available at the time this evaluation was completed. Should this information be available at a later time, the team may wish to reconsider to consider this additional information when determining Tim's programming needs and accommodation. And my client's mother will indicate that she has brought this issue up when she was talking to the administration about there is no behavioral plan with special ed would indicate there needs to be. And that's not in any of the reports that I saw written up to justify the proposed expulsion. So it's pretty clear that this evaluation team that we're talking about knew that behavior was the major problem. And they indicate that. And so that is in response to your question. And that would have been one of the issues I brought up, which relates to the fact they made no accommodation to attempt to deal with what they recognized professionally in this team as a behavioral problem that was just not documented by medical reports that were current, that they had in their possession when they did the report. And this is available
since we're here talking